JJ, we are about to enter a restricted animated zone. The only way to leave is when we meet again on the way out. You're listening to Trailer Rewind, a monthly conversation about movies you may have missed in theaters and that are now available on streaming services. Every month, we dig into the archives and view a film that Pete and Andy talked about in their trailer picks. JJ and I watch it and have a very spoilery conversation about it. Today, we're looking at The Congress, which was directed by Ari Folman. He gained attention for his 2008 animated documentary, Waltz with Bashir. And this was Pete's pick, The Congress, from May 23rd, 2014. Today is June 19th, 2018, and The Congress is available on Amazon Prime. And, bonus notes, I found it also available on Vudu with ads.
Oh, wait, so Vudu is giving
streaming now
they
with have
ads?
Opened up, so there are some movies that they will offer for free, but you have to deal with some advertisement on that. Yeah, exactly.
I don't mind that.
And then I love
and
Vudu.
I
also
That's
found
great.
it through my public library as part of, I guess they have a connection with an online service that handles digital media called Hoopla Digital, and you have movies there, there's music there, there's graphic novels there. So I found this there as well. So you may want to check with your public library to see if they have Hoopla Digital. Now,
well, and I'm a big library guy. Is Hoopla Digital, is it an app? Is it something that I could put onto like my Roku or my Apple TV or something like that?
Not yet. It's
Okay.
right now, I think it's limited to like your laptop.
Okay.
Maybe on a tablet, because I'm
Sure.
thinking, I think any
Web access would
sort
do
of-
that. Yeah. that's
yeah,
great.
but not like your smart TV or any of those devices that I'm aware of, but computer, iPad, iPhone, tablet, those things, you should be able to have it there. So multiple options for getting to this one for our viewers, for our listeners. And for our listeners out there, supporting us as a patron on patreon.com/thenextreel gets you into our Discord group where there's always fun conversation about films. In June, we had an interesting Brian De Palma discussion. And we had a raging, like, Ocean's 12, I should say, schism. Now, JJ, have you seen Ocean's 12?
I have, but see, so now this is tough because, Soderbergh is my favorite director. And so I read all of the stuff on Discord and I listened to all the arguments. And, the reality is I get why the movie is frustrating to so many people who don't like it. But that franchise is just something that I just really, really like. So I give it tons of apologies. I can't explain away the problems that people have with it, but the Ocean's 11, 12, 13, I just have so much fun with it, and it's so powerful for me that I dig it.
Okay, so that clarifies which side of the schism you are falling on. So, yes, you're on the good side with me and Andy. It's just like, just go have fun with these movies.
Right.
Just have fun.
Yes.
All right.
Yes.
Well, if people want to sort of dig into that debate, they can become a Patreon supporter and get access to Discord to delve into that and any other future debates, discussions that we are going to have. Plus, you get the weekly Saturday matinee episodes, which is the home of our trailer picks and discussion of the latest film news and our lists, the lists we love, the lists that we hate. This past time when we were doing Ocean's 12, it was supposed to be train heists, and I came up with movies about trains. There weren't necessarily heists there, and I realized I need to see more movies with trains in them because
We're
my
not
list
always
was
perfect.
No, we're not. But it's fun. It was a great diversity of lists about trains and train heists, so you get access to that. So for this one here, the Congress, Pete said that he was giddy with excitement, and Andy was too. The trailer, Andy said it blew his mind. Pete said it looked gorgeous, and he noted, how Pete is about his IMDb score.
Oh, yeah.
The 6. Yeah. So he said this was a 6.8 out of 10, so which is a strong indicator of this.
It's gone down now. It's 6.5.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, Andy said he had not seen Waltz with Bashir. I haven't either. And that's one of those things where I know documentaries, it's sometimes tough to find time for those, especially when you're dealing with something that is, really can be really tragic and sad, like, dealing with war in the Middle East there. But he was hoping to see it before watching the Congress because of the animated sequences. And I know we'll get into the animated parts of this film as well.
Oh, yeah.
Pete was just hoping it would be available on streaming services soon so that he could see it. So Pete, get out there. It's on Amazon Prime. It's on Vudu with ads and Hoop the Digital through your public library. So Pete, you've got no reason to not go watch this right now.
You had it all, Robin. A movie queen at 24. And you slammed all the open doors, crushed all the dreams. But then Aaron's condition started going downhill.
Eventually, you will be completely blind.
This proposal won't be on the table again. Robin Wright for Jeff Green.
You're the future, Robin. You're a princess bride. And now I'm in this situation.
What situation are you in, Jeff?
The situation of offering you the last contract that you'll ever have. We want to scan you. All of you. Your body, your face, your emotions, your laughter, your tears. And we want to own this thing called Robin Wright.
I have to take care of my son.
So, JJ, the Congress.
Yeah. They called it the Congress.
Well, I guess I should also mention that title is because it's adapted from a novel.
Right.
So this was an adaptation of a 1971 novel written by Stanislaw Lem, which was called The Futurological Congress. So, which was, sort of dark humor, science fiction out of the 70s. Stanislaw Lem, some people may be familiar with him as a science fiction writer from some of his other novels that he has written that have been adapted into films. I think if I pull up his list, I think
last month you told me that this was a mind bender, and I
Yes.
got all excited. But this is one of those don't judge a movie by its title things, because I thought we were into some sort of some movie about legislative drama. But this is
not at
much different than that.
Yes. Yeah. This is, to me, this reminded me of, I think, Stanislaw Lem, sci-fi. Philip reminded me of some sort of Philip Dick as well. And I think they have some similarities. So it reminded me a lot of Scanner Darkly. It also reminded me of the William Burroughs, the adaptation of Naked Lunch, where you've got a film that's sort of in reality and the things shift off into, things can go just off the rails crazy. And then when you get into these bizarre sort of dreamlike worlds, you get sort of the possibility of utopia. You've got, different factions and what they stand for, and usually a hero or main character that is in between the two sides and is sort of, our audience surrogate of going through this and being pulled from side to side, trying to understand or see the merits of both sides of whatever war or debate is going on. So this is, so
it's less impressionistic than Yellow Submarine, but it's definitely in the style of that. I mean, honestly, where it's taking you through this trip when it shifts to animation. That is, it's taking you through this trip, and it's kind of putting the onus on the viewer to understand where you're going. And in the first viewing, which I've only seen it once, and I confess that I think it's more important to watch this movie a couple times so that you really set yourself up for how you want to view what's going on in the story. Because the first time you're kind of just on a ride and you're kind of trying to figure out where everything is and what everything means. Because it definitely, once it gets to animated land, there's a whole lot of very impressionistic, artistic ways to look at the fairly political statements that it's trying to make, both about identity and society. So, Yellow Submarine is the one that I thought about it.
Oh, so yes. So that transition. So I think we can talk about both halves, but the transition, how well, because that's a really, for me, that can make or break the movie. When you go from, we're shooting, in the real world with live actors and recognizable faces. You've got, Danny Houston and Robin Wright and Harvey Keitel and Cody Smith McPhee. You've got, these actors that we've seen in movies before. And then you transition to now crazy animation, and now we've got some, actors that are going to make that transition to the animated, some that exist we only see in that animated land. How well did that transition work for you, since we spend almost half of the movie in the real world before spending, the remainder of it in this animated world. How did that as a effect or storytelling device work for you?
Well, it's tough because it's a different kind of animation than we're used to seeing today. It's very imperfect. And I think that my initial sentiment after the movie was over, I would have said that I didn't like how it transitioned because I was uncomfortable with the fact that I didn't understand what was going on and that it felt imperfect, that it felt like the voiceover wasn't really matching the track, or that it didn't seem to be polished, right? Those are my first feelings. Okay. But as I think more about what's going on and I compare it to a movie like Yellow Submarine or something that we've even covered here on Trailer Rewind with like Anomalisa, where it's almost intended to be imperfect, to give you a sense of otherness. And when you finally get through the film and you start to process what it really means from a societal standpoint, I think it's appropriate. And I think it actually, if you're talking about specifically the mechanics of the transition, when she passes the security desk and is driving and all of a sudden the effects, the what do they call them, hallucinogens or hallucination pieces start to take effect, that was done really well. And I was really into it as she made the transition specifically. But once we get into the world, I spent some time trying to figure out where, as a viewer, as an audience member, where I was going to sit with this. And I didn't quite like it at first. It didn't feel beautiful, which is, I think, interesting when you see or you hear the trailer. It felt off. But ultimately, in review of the film, I think that was done on purpose and done for an artistic purpose. So I can value that.
I watched this the first time a few weeks ago, and then I watched it just, I think, like 3 or 4 days ago again to just sort of refresh.
That was smart. Because
there was so much really felt after a first viewing sort of lost at sea. But after having time to digest and then go back, I was able to, I think, now we can walk our way through this. I think I was able to trace a thread through this a little bit more clearly than I was the first time, because when you get into that hallucinogenic dream state, you're putting your trust in this director to take you through safely, and you lose sense of what's reliable and what's trustworthy. And particularly in this case, where you've got a future where you've got two different people or two different groups trying to tell Robin what's real or what's going on. And you don't know what to trust, because clearly we're separated from reality. So the laws of physics don't apply. We have interesting transitions of time. So it's always difficult. We get sort of into that mind bender mode of, I don't know what to trust, but I have to trust the story's going to take me someplace. And when somebody says X amount of time has passed, I don't know if that's true or not. I don't know if when they tell me I am someplace, if I'm really there or not. So that I was able to have a little bit more faith and confidence and comfort in where things were going. And I had a greater sense of purpose to the journey that Robin takes through this, that there were some breadcrumbs, I think, early on that helped me see a foundation that was there.
Well, and I don't know if we've ever considered this question before, but I don't know if we consider needing to watch a movie multiple times, meaning that it's a good film or a bad film. But I definitely think on second viewing, this one is going to be better, because it's going to, instead of trying to figure out where the film is pulling you, you're able to, like you said, observe what's happening and really take in the specialness of this piece of art. And it's really different. It's a really different film. And there are parts that I really liked, and there are parts that I really didn't like about that sort of differentness.
Let's start at the beginning and sort of follow Robin's path here. And I'll point out some things that I noticed on the second viewing, which I had struggled with the first time, which has to do with some subplot pieces, I think, that I was struggling with. So, I mean, the basic premise is it's Robin Wright starring as herself in this film, and we're in an era where there is a technological advancement that's coming along, where studios are going to digitize and scan actors so that basically the actors can go live their lives as they wish, and they've basically signed over the rights of their likeness. They're not allowed to perform or act anywhere on stage, screen, or anything, because they've signed over the rights to this thing that is their personality, their persona, their celebrity. And the studio then can take that digitized actor that they now own and put them in whatever, roles that they want. And so that's where we start off with this. And Harvey Keitel plays her agent. And this is, I find interesting because we have a lot of discussion about things that, if you've tracked Robin Wright's career, you know her as Princess Buttercup from The Princess Bride. You know her as Jenny from Forrest Gump. And they play around with that. And this is where I struggle with, do I assume this is true things about the real Robin? Or are these things that are fictionalized for this version of Robin in the movie The Congress, about her being a difficult actor who has frustrated studios because she's not always taken the roles that they want her to take, and she's put her family first, and it's often cost studios millions of dollars, and that her career has been on a downward slide, and that she hasn't had a really big hit in like over a decade. And
how do they do that in the book? I mean, obviously they can't be talking about her in the book.
No, and this is,
so there's got to be some translation here.
Oh yeah, this is, I think everything with Robin and the film industry is layered onto, is something new brought to the novel. I think the idea of, which I haven't read, but I would say probably has to do with the latter half of when we get to the actual Congress, sort of convention and what's going on with reality. Yeah. And I think that's where there's going to be more from the book. But yeah, clearly all this is based on, early 21st century, these, Robin Wright as an actress and what she's done with her career. And then we have a subplot with her son, played by Cody Smith McPhee, who's got a fascination with aircraft, but he's also Paul Giamatti plays his doctor, and her son is losing his hearing.
Right. And
eventually may also go blind. So he's losing this ability to sort of interact or have sensory access to the real world. It's being slowly shut off from him.
And in particular, it sounds like he's underwater when it hears it. And they play with that audio really well.
Yes.
The story.
Oh yeah. There's that scene where Paul Giamatti is, they've got Aaron in a separate room, and he's got headphones, and Paul Giamatti is the doctor, says a word, and they ask for Aaron to say the word back. It's words that have similar sounds, but he's clearly missing parts of the words. So you get that sense of this, deafening, this loss of hearing that's going on with him. But then this is the part that I passed over the first time, but on the second time, it made more sense.
Robin, Aaron has a beautiful mind. He is taking the information in and translating it as he will. It is a gift. He hears throne, says alone, but he is perfectly aware of what he is doing. Now imagine what movies will be like in 50 years. I think that this is somewhat similar to what Aaron is doing.
In what way?
In the way that the movie guys will just have electronic stimuli that our brains translate according to what is in our subconscious. See, people will be given story data, and they'll cast their mother or their girlfriend as Marlena Dietrich or you, all depending on what is in their particular box. And this is exactly what Aaron is doing now. He's a rare case, and he is ahead of his time by God knows how many decades.
I heard that the second time around. I thought, this is a little breadcrumb for me about what happens later on after we get into, and when we get into the animated zone, as far as what Robin experiences, because we are in a different reality. And is it about her making meaning for herself? So that's sort of where we are in the real world. There's I found a very humorous sequence where Harvey Keitel as her agent comes and shows her a clip from a movie that's got a digitized actress in it. And it's like the worst cliche scene out of like a horrible romantic comedy ever. And, he makes a great selling point of like, look, she was off in Paris. She didn't have to be sitting here saying these horrible lines of dialogue with an actor, kissing an actor with bad breath. And, she's got this freedom. But her objection is that actress doesn't have a choice. And this is another part of the story that's very interesting to me, is Robin Wright as an actress, about her having a sense of control and choice in either accepting a role or not accepting a role. She has the ability to make choices about how she's going to represent herself or be part of certain films. And by signing over her digital rights, she's going to lose all of that. And so she has certain, stipulations. Like and I didn't realize it. She's never done science fiction. They mentioned that, and I went back on IMDb.
I thought that was just for the nature of the story.
But
I
looked back. I'm like, no, I don't see any science fiction. I mean, you could debate whether some things are,
it's meta.
Yeah. So
meta.
It's where I start to question how much of what they're saying is factually true in our world and how much of it is exaggeration or creation for the sense of the story. But that's sort of the first half of the film is her dealing with this choice and ultimately deciding she is going to do it, and she signs over. She gets scanned, and that's really the first half of the movie as her finally coming to decide, yes, I will do this. That's fine. She will now get to spend more time with her son because we know who needs that, and then we get a jump of 20 years.
And that's where we start the leap into the animation and the hallucination. Really, is what the piece is, right?
Right. Yes. Now we get little hints we get hints of her career. We see what they've done. We've got this. What is it? The
superhero.
The robot rebel Robin. The Triple R. Who's it's like this huge action franchise that has been built around her digital persona, and she sees one of the trailers for that as she's making her way on her road trip. So we see that the 20-year point.
So then the question for anyone who's going through a Mindbender movie, is that really what's happening, or is that the result of her taking hallucination?
As she enters the animated, the restricted animation zone? That's the question that I am not...
Because the concept of the book, and I've been, I've done some looking into it, in Wikipedia, and the concept of the book is really, it's really to focus on what is reality and how do we experience reality. So when you watch this movie, if you really sort of critically look at everything that happens once she's subjected to the hallucinogens and she's there, and you really try to figure out what is free will, what is choice, what is, if we're all hallucinating, where do we have any sort of actual free will? And how do we express that in the world? Everything comes into question, which makes it a really interesting movie to review and talk about and look at in multiple different ways.
Yeah, I come back to that point of, as Paul Giamatti, the doctor, said, now that, has Robin taken this? Is she now constructing this story? Are these things that are happening to her, or is it by her choice and free will, this story that she's participating in? And even gets to a thing that once she gets checked into the hotel, I mean, this is a trippy world. She gets into the hotel lobby, trippy. And people can just appear as there's so much going on visually. I want to say this is like Easter egg overload, because I think there's so many things whenever you get into animation, and I'm looking at this, I'm like, okay, that person, okay, what celebrity are they? Is that somebody I'm supposed to recognize, or is that just sort of a generic personality? Because there are some faces that seem very
This is where it becomes Ready Player One.
Yes, it does.
Right?
But when she gets to her hotel room and she takes the elevator up, she orders some room service, and the little robot, waiter comes in, and she asks something about, the lights have gone out and it's dark. She said, is it dark, or is it all in my mind? And he says basically, well, it's both. It is dark because it is in your mind. And if you see the dark, it's because you chose the dark.
Right.
Which I thought, what does this mean? Is this telling me that everything that she's seeing is a hallucination that she's causing herself to have? I don't.
Yep.
Yeah. It gets, because.
Yep. It is that. But what does that mean? Right. That's the next step. So she is in control. She is choosing it. And wow, what does that mean to what's showing up for her?
Right.
Everything from in the hotel room to her really kind of mentally breaking down there through some nightmarish, just really difficult things to stomach. And then where it goes from there, ultimately what we're told in the scene is that she's choosing this path that she's going on. And yet, if you're stuck in a hallucination, how much choice do you really have?
Yes. And again,
Ooh,
yeah. Oh, there's
great.
There's so much about free choice and what that means. And that gets to what I think is the really interesting point, because now that she's in this world, this animated world, it's 20 years in the future. And early on, when she signs her digital rights off, she signs it for a period of 20 years. So clearly this is the opportunity for contract, renegotiations. Are they going to renew the contract? What's going to happen? What's the studio going to do? And this is that point. And then we get like an echo of that scene again. So she has a meeting with the producer from Miramount Studios again, but this time it's like it's ratcheted up a notch to like ridiculous levels again, which I don't know if this is a commentary on, can has to reflect back on her initial choice of, it's ridiculous and ludicrous that a person would be able to sign away their personality, their representation of themselves, because now in the animated world here where we are, it's an even more like ludicrous ask that they're making of her,
right?
Because they're asking how do they say they're gonna, whereas before it's so funny the parallels, because on the first time she signs her life away, he's like, hey, look, this whole structure we have is going away. The whole thing with actors and agents and all that's going away. This is the next big thing. And so here we are 20 years later, and it's, this whole structure we have with screenwriters and animators not being able to make deadlines, this artifice, this is all going away, because now people are going to be able to, they're able to distill a person down into like a substance that you could eat or drink, and I don't know what that means.
Well, think of the commentary that if she chooses to do this, right? If Robin Wright looks at it and says, when you start off in the business and you make a sacrifice or you make a choice to enter some sort of contract, and then years later, because of the choices you've made, potentially what they're saying in this film, because of the choices that a person like Robin Wright made to create this amazing character, this triple R character, and then it takes off and it creates all this money and revenue, and then the technology advances, that all of a sudden 20 years later, this contract that you signed that you never thought you would ever sign because it was so outlandish is now small potatoes, and now they're changing everything. And the whole, you think of what's happened to Hollywood, and you think of how the studio system has evolved, and now what we're doing at the box office and how we're switching to streaming services. It's a commentary on all of it. It's a commentary on how people make art and how people make choices and how those choices affect the entire universe with which we consume those choices. I think, again, super heavy, super deep stuff, and not all fed to you as a viewer. This is stuff that you have to come up with on your own as you're watching the film. And there are going to be a lot of people who are going to go watch this movie and go, I didn't hear that at all. I just saw some freaky stuff and some crazy visuals. But if you're a deep thinker, there's a lot to get into with this film.
Yeah. And, to this point in the movie, I'm okay. I can track along. Even the first time I thought, okay, yeah, the visuals are kind of crazy, but I have a plot that I'm holding on to at this point. And, I even understand the studio's logic, because as as Danny Houston's explaining this, he says, yeah, they're going to be able to do with your essence, whatever, anything. And she starts to push back against that. And he says, okay, well, let's say you're laying in bed and you're having a fantasy about someone. Do you pay royalties to that person? But clearly you're using their essence for your own personal pleasure. So don't you owe them something, because you're, basically, how do we make this a commodity that we can sell? And that's what they're doing. And I thought, okay, that's really going far. But then we go from there to the actual event of the Congress, the meeting, where we have this crazy like MC whose name is Reeve Bobs.
Okay.
Which I want to say, okay, we're building off of a Steve Jobs type of,
Oh, of course.
personality,
Yes,
who's
definitely.
this very.
I didn't even take that leap, but
Come
that
on.
makes sense.
He's this cultish leader who's like leading the way for the next generation and achievement, and he's just hailing this as the next big step and the next great advancement for people, and it's going to do wonders for everybody. But then Robin comes up and basically shames everybody. Says, "Look, you spent all your research on this when you could have been helping my son. Why was our research put into our own self-gratification or entertainment rather than helping people like her son, who's now at this point, losing his hearing and blind, and we're not helping people, we're helping ourselves." Right.
This talks back to one of our Saturday matinee conversations. It's because of capitalism.
Yes, it is. It is.
Totally.
But this is then things go bonkers, because then we've got John Hamm's character shows up and there's like a rebellion there. She's fleeing. There's, explosions. And then she's like in the subterranean depths with John Hamm, and there's giant, crickets or bugs. And then I lose track of everything at this point.
Yeah. Well, and then it becomes what dreams may come.
Yes.
Because all of a sudden, then the whole world, because everything becomes a hallucination. And that, from what I've read on Wikipedia, that's kind of the basis for the original story, is that once you're in your world, and this world that is of your creative mind's creation, you can easily lose yourself. And then what do you do to bring yourself back? And I think that's the essence of the third act of this film, is the creative and really super intelligent way that she goes about getting what she truly wants in life, which I think is fantastic. And I got tripped up in a lot of stuff. She's making her way through the weirdness and seeing her daughter and seeing all the beautiful stuff, but then choosing to leave the hallucination world and then seeing the lemmings of the people that are all taking the drugs and sort of all of that. And then how she ultimately makes another extreme choice to decide to get back where she wants, where she can experience love in life the way that she wants. There's a lot of power in the third act. I really liked the third act of the film. That was my favorite part of the movie altogether, was the intelligence that character, and you have to call her a character even though she's Robin Wright, uses to get what she wants in life.
Oh yeah. To me, it took me a moment to figure out exactly what's going on, because she leaves the crazy, because it's just clear that things have gone off the rails. But what is very interesting, I don't know if you caught this, when she first enters. So when she's driving in the Porsche in the real world and she goes to the guard, and then he basically says, you're entering, a restricted animated zone. The only way out is you're going to come back and you're going to see me on your way out.
Right.
And if you watch, as she's walking through bar, he's there behind the bar. You see him as an animated figure, like polishing a glass, as bartenders do in movies, like, I've got my cloth and I'm shining my glass. And I thought, there's the guy. And that's just as she starts the hallucination. She's taken the sort of counter drug to come back to the real world. And there she is, sort of in the streets.
And my explanation of that was her brain telling her how to get out, because when she does eventually then get out of the crazy, you see that person who is IRL, who is in real life before moving to the crazy, he's nowhere to be found.
Right. He's not there.
And I think that's part of her brain's kind of fail-safe mechanism to say, I'm leaving the hallucination now.
Yes, exactly. And it was a nice visual callback to that, to tell us, yes, her mind is coming back. Then she's on a journey she's trying to, I guess, reconnect with her family now. So she goes and tracks down the doctor again, Paul Giamatti, and he tells her there's no way to get back to the world that she just left. Right? She wants to get back there because of her daughter, and she wants to find these people again. She can't. So she re-enters sort of the animated world again, but very differently. And it took me on the second viewing to really piece together what it was. I had suspicions, and there's some funny little inside things. So what I am seeing is she is re-entering the animated world on her own terms, in her own story. She gets to pick sort of how she's going to re-enter. She enters the world as her son, Aaron.
It's the only way to find him.
Right. It's the only way she can get back to him is to live his life. So she goes through his steps. So it's very interesting to see from a sort of infant and toddler's point of view, because there's one scene where it looks like they're on a movie set. I was trying to figure things out, and the set that they're on looked really familiar, and I think it's a reference to Message in a Bottle, the one with Kevin Costner. Exactly, because there's
Okay.
like the sunset, and I'm like, that looks familiar. I'm like going back through her IMDb list. I'm like, I think that's what they're
she
referencing
in
there.
that?
Yes, she was in.
Wow.
So I was like,
I love it.
So it's those again touchstones to the true real world that we're in. But then
Right.
she continues on the paths. We see her going through all these places, and then ultimately she finds her way back to her son.
And it's beautiful.
Yes.
It's a beautiful resolution. It's, and that's, I actually, you could technically call what we've just gone through and going through the exercise of the film a spoiler, but I think that it's not really, because I think, when you talk about this, watching this movie is like watching a painting that moves. There's so much that changes over the course of the film. We talk about that 3-act structure. Each one of them is very different. And I didn't love all of them, but I really loved the third. I thought that the beauty and the way that they wrapped this up, and that's what kind of makes me feel good about the movie, is that there's this second viewing where you're going to be able to see the art to it. That's a lot more special when you're not trying to figure it out.
Well, I was really primed for a rewatch of this because I think it was yesterday that I went back and sort of rewatched big pieces of it again, because I had just over the weekend for Father's Day did my Father's Day double feature of Interstellar and Tree of Life. And so I think a movie like Tree of Life really primes you for something like this, because you don't have a traditional narrative plot to pull you through. It is about image and what you make of that and how you piece things together. So yeah, if I'd spend a lot of time with a lot more, sort of mainstream narrative films and then jump into this, it could be very disconcerting because of your expectations. And I think the clearest recommendation I can make to somebody is walk into this in a mindset where you're ready to maybe pause it several times to think about what you've just said, to talk to somebody about what you've just seen. But I think it is a rewarding experience. And after, letting it sit and digest in a second viewing, I've really enjoyed this movie because I think it does give you a lot to think about. And I enjoy films like that, where it not only is keeping you off your guard, it's challenging you to keep up with it, to keep you sort of second guessing, but not in a frustrating way. But ultimately then it's rewarding because, as we've said, it's tackling some big issues and questions about all kinds of things, about choice and life and capitalism and ownership of things. And it doesn't give you answers.
Nope.
It asks you lots of questions, and I think it gives you an example.
And I would argue that it doesn't ask the questions. It challenges you to ask the questions of yourself, and I think that is what would make this kind of movie special for you. I don't think a lot of people in the world are going to love this movie, because I think a lot of people are going to be frustrated by the lack of a narrative through line. And I think that all the movies that we've brought up here in comparison to it, I'll just talk about the two that I brought up in particular, or the three really, Yellow Submarine, Ready Player One, and What Dreams May Come. Yellow Submarine notwithstanding, they have such more of a narrative through line that it's going to bring you to those questions. This movie doesn't do that. This movie sets up the picture and allows you to ask the questions of yourself. So you really have to like that if you're going to go into this movie that way.
That's a good point to sort of cap off our discussion, because if we start pulling at more threads, I think we could be here all night on this. But I think we covered, really key important points to access this film for people that are interested and challenged to want to engage with this movie and let it push them to ask those questions, as you said. So given that, how do you rate a movie like this? Where
it was so tough.
Yeah.
It really, basically, so for me, I'm such a big fan of story. And I like a movie when it's well executed. In particular, I felt like the first act, all the real life stuff was a little long.
Okay.
It was tough for me. And then I was off put by some of the imperfectness of the second act when we first get to and I was confused most of the time. That third act, again, I talk about being my favorite, but in general, the only movies that I could rank this movie above were movies that I didn't really like.
Oh,
I couldn't
interesting.
I couldn't
Okay.
really argue for this movie about things that I liked even a little bit, because I felt like those things felt stronger. So it ended up in a really low place on my flick chart, but I definitely think this is a movie that people should see. So it's a tough thing for me. So it ended up at 132, and that's out of a grand total of 178 for me, which is really really low. That comes in at 26%.
Okay.
But it came below Odd Thomas, which I really liked,
yeah.
right? So you feel that sort of trailer rewind thing.
Okay.
And then it came above 999, which I really didn't like, right? So it's a great like stopping point to go right there on it. And I think, if I was going to do a star rating, I'd probably be somewhere between 3 and 4, and definitely a like. But it's just it's so hard to compare this movie to other movies. Where did it show up for you?
So I ranked it, and then when I rewatched it, I re-ranked it, and it moved up because again I had my bearings about me as I was navigating this film the second time, and so that helped it climb a bit
yeah,
higher
that makes sense.
this time. So I think it's in a very entertaining spot. So it's at number 30 out of 320, which is like
that's high.
91%. So
wow,
this is what it's in between, which makes no sense to me. And I think one of these films deserves a re-ranking. So at number 31, I have Solo, a Star Wars story, which we just did.
And this was better than Solo for you. Okay, that's okay.
Just below number 29, The Lobster.
Oh, okay.
Which
now Lobster's in my top 5.
Right. So to me, I feel that I think Solo's probably sitting high off of just inner child thrills, and I think on rewatch that may come down. But I think given I've seen The Lobster a couple times and I've seen The Congress a couple times, I can put those side by side, and I think the Lobster does earn to be above. Earns a place above The Congress, but I sort of see them as they're challenging films that are gonna that, as you said, they push you to ask questions and they don't give you easy answers, and to me they're still very rewarding experiences. So I own The Lobster, so I'm a big fan of that. And I will tell you that I went back and saw Solo this weekend. I saw it for Father's Day weekend. I took the boys to it, and I didn't like it. I didn't like it as much on second watch. So, interesting.
So that was interesting because I gave it a lot of grace the first time I watched it, but it just didn't really perform for me as well the second time. It wouldn't fall huge on my list, but it didn't. The luster wore off a little bit on it for me. So there you go.
So I'm happy, and I'd say it's 4 stars and a like for me because it's definitely challenges you the first time, and then you know where you're going. You can you're not sort of like scrambling for like a handhold of like how do I keep track of myself in this, because there's so much. But and I think I appreciated some of the humor in it, when you've got and you don't they never name him, but it's clearly Tom Cruise is there. He's like the other actor that's there.
If you go to IMDb, the actor who plays him is actually credited as playing Tom Cruise, but they never name him.
But it's he's in his Top Gun flight suit thing, and the big smile, and it's Tom Cruise. Just little moments like that. I wasn't so disoriented that I was like, why is Tom Cruise in this? What's going on? I could see sort of we're now commenting on and playing with, this whole idea of celebrity. So
I just kind of wish John Hamm was actually playing John Hamm.
Yeah, well, yes.
Because he's playing someone different altogether.
Yes,
but
he is. But it's such a great cast to this. It is a challenging film. Harvey Keitel has a great monologue when Robin's getting scanned. He's got this big monologue about how he first got into the industry, and it's like one of those things where I could see
that's the biggest speech in the film, I think.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, why is Harvey going to do this? He wants to do that scene. I think that's one of those. How do you get a name like Harvey into a movie like this? You give him a couple of meaty, speeches like that, and he's on board for the first chunk of the film. You get him in a couple of days, and he's done. But it was great to get a really recognizable cast. Paul Giamatti. This was 2013, so 5 years ago. So not too long ago. These are all recognizable actors. I think hopefully that will give people some access to this. If it was unknowns, maybe it'd be more disorienting. But I encourage people that are up for a challenging film to take some time. Streaming is perfect because you can pause it and chill out decompress and come back to it, take it in little bite-sized chunks, and I think people will have a really good time with this one.
Yeah, it's a thinker. You're going in there, it's going to be a thinker for sure.
Ooh, it's going to take a while to digest it. I think even over the summer for parts, because I don't know, I feel compelled to like dig into scenes again. On this one, because I do enjoy what it's asking. But you know what? We do have some time over the summer to digest this one, because for our listeners out there, we're about to take a little break here in the summer of 2018. So if you're listening to this as it's just being posted in the summer of 2018, we're going to take a break. We're working on some great stuff for the second half of 2018. This gives you a chance to dig into some of the back catalog. Pete and Andy, there's so many great series you could just sort of jump into and binge as we're on our little summer hiatus to dig into some of their pieces. If you're new to Trailer Rewind, JJ, this is episode 21. We've got like 20 episodes out there.
Yay!
That people can,
Blackjack.
Yeah, and I think as we discussed in a few months ago, there's some really good stuff in there. We've only had a couple clunkers. There's some really good undiscovered gems out there.
I've been sharing a bunch of suggestions with people. It's good stuff.
Does it feel like 21 episodes?
No. Has it been 21 months? I don't think it's been 21 months,
yes,
has it?
Yeah, it's been it's been almost 2 years we've been doing this. So
what happened?
I don't know. We just having such a great time. We just keep rolling along with this. But we're going to come back. We're going to come back in August, and in August, Pete and Andy are going to start off their series going back 50 years. They're doing their 50th anniversary series, and they're starting off with 2001. Andy and I just this past weekend got a chance to see it, 70 millimeter film projection of 2001. It's the first time I'd seen it on the big screen. I know Andy and I had a lot to sort of discuss about just even the merits of 70 millimeter with that versus digital. So I know he and Pete are going to have a lot to talk about with 2001. Similar to The Congress, it's not an easily accessible film. There's a lot of crazy stuff that happens at the end of that. So hang on through the summer, and they're going to come back strong with 2001. But yeah, enjoy the summer. Dig into the archives, play around. There's lots of great gems. And if you haven't, listeners, please head over to iTunes and give us a rating and review. It helps other film fans discover us. So make the most of the summer. There's a lot to see in theaters and discover online. Go watch a movie with a friend. Get out of the heat. Go sit in the air conditioning, or go invite them over to your place and sit down and stream some shows and have a conversation about it. And if it's one that's been discussed on any of our shows here, we'd love to hear from you and let us know. Hondo.